I'm standing barefoot on the cold morning dew staring at a $2.5 million mansion being built on my property. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust burns my nostrils as a construction crane lowers hand-carved Italian marble into what used to be my wife's rose garden. That blonde woman in the $300 hard hat screaming orders at the crew? She's Vivian Thornfield, our HOA president, and she just told me to get off her construction site, on land I own, that I paid for with 30 years of electrician wages. The metallic taste of rage fills my mouth as I watch her destroy everything my wife Elena planted during her arthritis therapy. But here's what Vivian doesn't know yet. I didn't just get my land back. I got her entire mansion for free, and she's now serving 18 years in federal prison. What would you do if your HOA president stole your backyard to build her dream house? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because this revenge story will restore your faith in justice. My name is Marcus Caldwell, and 6 months ago, I thought I'd finally made it. After 30 years crawling through scorching attics and rewiring houses as a union electrician, my wife Elena and I had saved enough to buy our dream retirement home in Willowbrook Estates, a planned community outside Phoenix that promised peaceful golden years living. Elena had been battling early-stage arthritis for 3 years, and her doctor recommended gardening as therapy. The gentle movements, the connection to soil, the satisfaction of nurturing life, it was better than any prescription. So when we found this corner lot with rich, dark soil that smelled like rain and possibility, perfect for her therapeutic garden, we didn't hesitate to pay $180,000. It wiped out 8 years of careful savings, but seeing Elena's face light up as she planned her rose beds made every penny worth it. The sound of Elena humming old folk songs while she planted lavender in terracotta pots still echoes in my memory, back when our biggest worry was whether the automatic sprinklers could reach the corner herb spiral. Enter Vivian Thornfield, 48 years old, real estate attorney, and the kind of person who treats a homeowners association like her personal kingdom. Picture a woman who wears $200 athletic wear to check her mailbox and parks her white Tesla diagonally across 2 spaces because compact car rules don't apply to luxury vehicles. She lived in the neighborhood's largest house with her investment banker husband, and as HOA president, she'd weaponized every rule, regulation, and bylaws loophole against residents she deemed undesirable. Translation: anyone who couldn't afford to fight back. Our first taste of Vivian's special attention came 3 weeks after moving in. I'd installed a perfectly legal 6-foot cedar privacy fence around our backyard. Permits pulled, inspections passed, the works. The sweet smell of fresh-cut cedar still hung in the desert air when Elena and I found the violation notice taped to our front door like a scarlet letter. Fence style does not match neighborhood aesthetic standards, it declared in Vivian's aggressive handwriting. Fine, $200 per day until corrected. I spent that evening with my calloused electrician's hands flipping through 47 pages of HOA bylaws under our kitchen's harsh fluorescent light, washing down the bitter taste of injustice with gas station coffee. Turns out those aesthetic standards had been mysteriously amended exactly 2 weeks after our fence installation. The timing was about as subtle as a brick through a window. When I showed up to appeal at the next board meeting, I discovered it had been secretly moved to a Wednesday afternoon, when working people couldn't attend. The appeal was denied in absentia by Vivian and her 2 rubber-stamp board members. Elena's arthritic hands shook as she wrote the $400 check to cover fines for a fence that had been legal when we built it. So I swallowed my pride and replaced our beautiful cedar fence with Vivian's approved white vinyl, the same soulless style as every other fence in this beige purgatory. The contractors had barely loaded their trucks when the next violation notice appeared: unauthorized garden structures. Elena's raised beds, the ones her physical therapist had specifically recommended for her arthritis, were now somehow illegal. This time the fine jumped to $300 per day. That's when the awful truth hit me. We weren't dealing with rules. We were dealing with a predator who'd identified vulnerable prey. The final trap sprung at the monthly community meeting, held in the development's soul-crushing beige community center that reeked of industrial carpet cleaner and broken dreams. Vivian casually mentioned that several corner lots had boundary irregularities from the original 1980s surveying. She graciously offered to hire an independent surveyor, who turned out to be her college sorority sister, to clarify property lines for everyone's peace of mind. Like an idiot, I agreed. I thought transparency would end the harassment. 3 weeks later, that fraudulent survey claimed 40% of our backyard was actually HOA common area. due to a convenient original plat error. The same backyard where Elena had planted $3,000 worth of therapeutic roses, where we'd hosted our granddaughter's birthday party, where I'd built a deck with my own hands and 30 years of construction knowledge. And that's when Vivian announced her masterstroke. She was going to build a community recreation pavilion on the newly discovered common area. Except the building permits told a very different story. This wasn't going to be a pavilion, it was going to be a $2.5 million luxury mansion. And she was building it on my stolen land. 3 months after that rigged survey, I woke up to the rumble of diesel engines and the mechanical beep, beep, beep of construction equipment backing up. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust mixed with desert dust drifted through our bedroom window as I watched a parade of cement trucks, excavators, and steel delivery vehicles turning our peaceful corner lot into an industrial war zone. Vivian stood in the middle of it all like Napoleon commanding at Waterloo, clipboard in one manicured hand, cell phone pressed to her ear with the other. She'd traded her usual tennis whites for a pristine hard hat and steel-toed boots that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. The woman looked like she was cosplaying as a construction worker for Halloween. The community recreation pavilion she'd promised the neighborhood? Complete fiction. After our fence disaster, I'd learned to be my own detective. The building permits, available to any citizen willing to stand in line at City Hall, told the real story. 4,500 square feet of luxury living space. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, gourmet kitchen, wine cellar, and an infinity pool. The architectural plans showed imported Italian marble, Brazilian hardwood floors, and custom millwork that would make a Beverly Hills mansion weep with envy. But here's where Vivian's scheme turned truly diabolical. She planned to keep her current house as her official residence for tax purposes, while living in the mansion as a caretaker residence for HOA facilities. The woman had figured out how to steal my land and dodge property taxes in one brilliant, illegal move. Time for my first counterpunch. I called Dorothy Hanson, whose late husband had spent 30 years as a city planner and had taught her a thing or two about separating legitimate surveys from fraudulent garbage. "Marcus," she said in that steel-edged voice that had terrified generations of 7th graders, "you need Eddie Kowalski. He's the most honest surveyor in Arizona, and he owes my Ralph a favor." Eddie showed up the next morning in a beat-up pickup that smelled like Marlboro Reds and honest work, a refreshing change from Vivian's Mercedes-driving sorority sister. He spent 3 hours with his surveying instruments, checking and double-checking measurements against the original 1987 recorded plat that Ralph had taught Dorothy to always verify at the county courthouse. "Son," Eddie said, mopping sweat from his weathered forehead with a red bandana, "whoever told you this is common area is either incompetent or crooked as a $3 bill. Your property line is exactly where you think it is." He'd learned the hard way, he told me, that preliminary drawings and updated surveys meant nothing unless they were properly recorded and approved, a lesson from a lawsuit that had nearly bankrupted him 20 years ago. Armed with Eddie's legitimate survey, I marched down to the city planning department like David approaching Goliath. The building inspector, Stan Kowalski, Eddie's nephew and a 30-year veteran who'd seen every scam in the book, took one look at the permits and shook his gray head like a disappointed father. "Marcus, something stinks worse than roadkill in August heat. These permits were pulled using a survey that contradicts every recorded plat since 1987. I'm issuing a stop work order right now." For 3 glorious days, the construction site fell silent except for the desert wind whistling through the steel framing. Elena actually smiled while watering her surviving roses, and I started to believe that truth and justice might actually mean something in this corner of Arizona. Then Vivian's lawyers descended like vultures circling fresh carrion. Within hours, she'd filed a $50,000 lawsuit against me for harassment, defamation, and intentional interference with lawful development. Her legal team painted me as an unstable retiree making false allegations to disrupt legitimate community improvements. Apparently, wanting to keep your own property makes you mentally unfit. But the real sucker punch came when I discovered the depth of her corruption. Vivian had been working her tennis partner Jessica Walsh, a city council member who owed her campaign funding, to fast-track the permits through an emergency development review. Suddenly, Willowbrook Estates desperately needed recreational facilities, and any delay would harm community welfare. The sound of gravel crunching under my work boots as I paced our driveway that night matched the grinding of my teeth. This wasn't just theft anymore, this was a conspiracy that reached into City Hall itself. That's when Jake Martinez knocked on our door around 9 o'clock, his usually steady combat veteran hands trembling as he showed me photos on his phone. "Marcus, they're pouring the foundation with concrete that looks like cake batter. I've seen enough construction to know this is the kind of work that kills people when buildings collapse." The photos showed workers mixing concrete that resembled gray soup more than structural material. But here's what made my blood pressure spike. They were deliberately rushing the foundation work to create what lawyers call a fait accompli, basically making the theft too expensive to undo. Over the weekend, while Building Inspector Stan was fishing at Lake Powell, Vivian's crews worked around the clock. The grinding sound of cement mixers at 2 a.m. violated every noise ordinance in the city, but somehow no citations materialized. Monday morning revealed why. Stan had been reassigned to other duties and replaced by a 25-year-old kid fresh out of college who treated Vivian like his favorite professor, offering extra credit. But my weekend research had uncovered something that would change everything. The Phoenix Business Journal archives told a familiar story. Scottsdale HOA president forced to demolish illegal addition after federal investigation. Same scheme, same perpetrator, 3 years ago. Vivian was a repeat offender, and this time, I wasn't signing any NDAs. The special assessment notice arrived on a Tuesday morning like a financial death sentence wrapped in legal letterhead. The expensive paper stock felt smooth and cold between my fingers, the kind of quality stationery that screams, "We're about to screw you professionally." Elena's arthritic hands fumbled with the certified mail envelope, her voice getting shakier with each word she read aloud. Special community assessment, $15,000 per household. Payment due within 60 days to fund essential community amenities and infrastructure improvements. Failure to pay will result in lien placement and potential foreclosure proceedings. $15,000. On our fixed retirement income, Vivian might as well have demanded we sacrifice our firstborn grandchild. I snatched the notice from Elena's trembling hands, scanning the fine print with the laser focus I used to reserve for live electrical panels that could kill you if you missed a detail. 127 households were getting financially carpet-bombed. But buried in the legal gymnastics, I found 3 addresses mysteriously exempt from current assessment due to prior community contributions. Guess whose address topped that golden list? Our beloved Napoleon in tennis whites. The bitter taste of injustice flooded my mouth as I grasped the elegant simplicity of her financial trap. Force us into bankruptcy, then swoop in to buy our house for pennies when we couldn't make the payment. It was economic warfare disguised as community improvement, like getting mugged by someone wearing a volunteer badge. But Vivian had made one crucial error. In her arrogance, she'd gotten sloppy with the legal requirements, and my decades of reading electrical codes had taught me that Satan lives in the fine print. I spent the next 3 days buried in our HOA's governing documents like a forensic accountant hunting war crimes. That's when I struck gold. Article 7, Section 3.2 clearly stated that any special assessment exceeding $5,000 required approval from 2/3 of all homeowners, not just whoever wandered into Vivian's kangaroo court. Ralph Hansen had once told Dorothy this was a standard protection after HOA boards in the 1990s had bankrupted entire communities with surprise assessments, and the state legislature finally stepped in. The vote that approved this financial mugging, 23 people attended, 18 voted yes, mostly intimidated retirees who'd been bamboozled by Vivian's lawyer speak about legal necessity and fiduciary responsibility. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Wednesday when working families couldn't attend, with notices mailed exactly 5 days before, the legal minimum, but arriving in most mailboxes just 2 days prior. My old union rep would have called this bargaining in bad faith, but in HOA Wonderland, it was apparently business as usual. Elena's medical expenses were climbing faster than Vivian's mansion walls. Her arthritis medications weren't covered by Medicare, and our monthly pharmacy bills had tripled since moving to Arizona's dry heat. The $15,000 assessment would obliterate our emergency fund and force us to choose between Elena's health and keeping our home. That's when Vivian delivered her masterstroke. She actually had the brass-plated audacity to knock on our front door with a solution. "Marcus," she said, standing on our porch in pristine tennis whites, like she was Mother Teresa offering charity, "I understand this assessment creates hardship for fixed-income residents. I'm prepared to offer you a payment plan, $500 per month for 30 months, if you'll withdraw your frivolous property dispute and stop disrupting our community improvement project." The woman was literally offering to rent my own stolen land back to me, with interest. You've got some industrial strength nerve, lady, I told her, gripping our doorframe to keep from doing something that would land me in handcuffs. But I'll pass on your generous offer to pay for my own property twice. Her smile never wavered, but something reptilian flickered behind those cold blue eyes. I do hope you'll reconsider, Marcus. Legal battles can be so stressful for elderly couples, especially when one spouse has serious health conditions that require consistent medical care. The metallic taste of rage flooded my mouth. Was this sociopath actually threatening Elena's health care? Meanwhile, the mansion was rising from my stolen soil like a monument to greed. Through our kitchen window, I could see crews installing materials that cost more than most people earned in a year. The sweet scent of expensive teak flooring drifted across the desert air, mixing with the acrid smell of imported tile adhesive. Custom windows arrived in crates marked fragile, hand-blown Italian glass. The sound of Elena's muffled sobs through our bedroom walls became my nightly soundtrack. My wife, who'd stared down factory supervisors and raised 3 kids on union wages, was being systematically destroyed by a predator in designer athletic wear. But other neighbors were cracking under the financial pressure too. Old Mr. Peterson cornered me at the community mailbox, his weathered hands shaking as he clutched his assessment notice like a medical diagnosis. Marcus, maybe we should all just pool our money and pay your share too. We can't afford lawyers and we're too old to start over. That's when Vivian's true genius hit me like a sledgehammer. She wasn't just robbing me, she was turning the entire community into unwilling accomplices by making my resistance their financial burden. But spiders, I'd learned from 30 years of crawling through attics, are vulnerable when you cut the right wire. And investigative reporter Sarah Morgan had just called me back with information about a certain HOA president's very colorful criminal history. Turns out Vivian had been playing this exact same game for years. Sarah Morgan's voice crackled through my phone speaker like a detective unveiling the smoking gun. Marcus, you're not going to believe what I found in the courthouse records. Your HOA president isn't just stealing your land. She's about to lose everything she owns. The documents Sarah emailed me that evening made my electrician's brain short-circuit. Vivian owed $1.2 million on her current house and hadn't made a mortgage payment in 3 months. Her investment banker husband's firm was under SEC investigation for securities fraud, with all their assets frozen pending federal charges. The mansion rising from my stolen soil wasn't just theft. It was a desperate attempt to hide assets before the government seized everything. Suddenly, Vivian's frantic construction timeline made perfect sense. She wasn't just stealing my land, she was racing against federal investigators. But while I was savoring this revelation, Vivian launched her most vicious counterattack yet. The next morning, I discovered all 4 tires on my pickup truck slashed to ribbons, the rubber hanging like black confetti in our driveway. The acrid smell of destroyed tire rubber mixed with the desert morning air as I surveyed the damage. Elena found the anonymous note tucked under our windshield wiper. Mind your own business, or next time it won't just be tires. That afternoon, the city building inspector, not our ally Stan, but his young replacement, showed up claiming he'd received multiple complaints about dangerous electrical work at our address. The kid couldn't have been more than 25, fresh out of college with a clipboard and an attitude problem. Sir, we've had reports that you're performing unlicensed electrical modifications, he announced, like he was arresting me for war crimes. I showed him my master electrician's license, the one I'd carried for 30 years without a single violation. Son, I was wiring houses before you were born. What specific violations are you investigating? He shuffled through his paperwork like a student who'd forgotten to study for an exam. Well, someone reported unauthorized electrical activities. The complaints were completely fabricated, but they served Vivian's purpose, harassment disguised as official business. That evening, Elena answered a phone call that made her face go white as construction dust. The voice was electronically disguised, but the message was crystal clear. Accidents happen to old ladies who don't mind their own business, especially ones with medical conditions. Elena's hands shook so violently she dropped the phone. The crash echoed through our kitchen like a gunshot, and I watched 30 years of my wife's strength crumble in real time. This wasn't about property lines anymore. This was about survival. Meanwhile, Vivian's construction had shifted into overdrive. The grinding sound of concrete mixers now ran 24 hours a day, violating every noise ordinance in the city. Weekend work crews arrived in unmarked vans paid in cash to avoid labor law compliance. The smell of wet concrete and sawdust became our permanent atmospheric condition. Jake Martinez's landscape crew had become my unofficial intelligence network. One of his guys, Miguel, approached me nervously outside the community center after a rigged board meeting. "Senor Marcus," he whispered, glancing around like he expected snipers. "They pay us cash to keep quiet, but what they're doing, it's not right. The electrical work, it's dangerous. The plumbing, it's not up to code. She told us to hurry, no matter what." Miguel showed me photos on his phone that made my stomach drop. Electrical boxes installed backwards, plumbing connections that would leak within months, foundation work that looked like a child's sand castle. Vivian wasn't just stealing my land, she was building a death trap on it. But here's where her desperation revealed the master plan. Miguel overheard Vivian on the phone with her insurance agent, discussing a massive policy on the new mansion. She was planning to establish residency, then claim catastrophic damage from construction defects or natural disasters. The insurance payout would exceed $4 million, triple the actual construction cost. It was insurance fraud on an industrial scale. The community was fracturing like concrete in an earthquake. Anonymous flyers appeared overnight claiming I was a lawsuit-happy troublemaker destroying property values. Some neighbors crossed the street to avoid talking to us. 3 families put their houses up for sale rather than deal with the drama. But Vivian's panic was becoming visible to anyone paying attention. The woman who'd once strutted through the neighborhood like she owned it now looked haggard and desperate. She'd lost weight, her designer clothes hung loose, and I'd caught her having screaming phone arguments in her Tesla at 6 a.m. The federal noose was tightening and she knew it. That's when the FBI agent contacted Sarah Morgan about her investigation into investment banker husband's case. Agent Jennifer Torres wanted to know about unusual real estate transactions and asset concealment activities involving the Thornfield family. The mansion was 60% complete when I made the discovery that changed everything. Hidden in a stack of Elena's medical files she kept locked in our bedroom safe, I found documents with her forged signature that I'd never seen before. Vivian hadn't just stolen our land and threatened our lives. She'd forged Elena's signature on papers that could cost us our house, our savings, and Elena's Medicare coverage. The woman had committed federal mail fraud, and she'd left a paper trail that would destroy her. Game over, Vivian. Time to pay the piper. The forged documents hit me like a live electrical wire to the chest. There, buried in Elena's medical paperwork that she kept locked in our bedroom safe, were papers I'd never seen before, all bearing Elena's signature in handwriting that looked like a child's attempt at forgery. The first document was dated 3 weeks before our fence dispute even began. A boundary adjustment consent agreement, supposedly signed by Elena, agreeing to voluntarily cede disputed property areas to HOA common use for community benefit. The signature was laughably fake. Elena's actual handwriting flows like cursive poetry, but this looked like someone had traced her name with their non-dominant hand during an earthquake. But the second document made my blood freeze solid. It was a medical power of attorney form, granting Vivian Thornfield temporary healthcare decision-making authority in the event Elena became incapacitated due to age-related cognitive decline. The date stamp showed it was supposedly signed the same day Elena had been in the hospital for her arthritis treatment, when she was unconscious under sedation. Elena stared at the papers with the hollow expression of someone who'd just discovered their house had burned down. "Marcus, I never signed these. I've never even seen them before. How did they get in my medical files?" That's when the horrible puzzle pieces clicked together like dominoes falling in slow motion. Vivian hadn't just stolen our land. She'd been setting us up for complete financial and medical control. With those forged documents, she could make life-or-death decisions about Elena's healthcare, while simultaneously justifying every illegal action she'd taken with our property. The sweet scent of Elena's lavender hand lotion mixed with the bitter taste of betrayal as I held my wife's trembling hands. "She's been planning this from the beginning," I said. "The fence violations, the special assessment, even the threats. It's all designed to break us down until you need medical intervention." Now, Sarah Morgan's investigation had uncovered federal documents showing this was Vivian's standard operating procedure. In Scottsdale, she'd targeted an elderly couple with early-stage dementia, forged similar documents, and nearly succeeded in having them declared incompetent before a sharp-eyed bank teller noticed the signature inconsistencies. But Elena's forged medical power of attorney revealed something even more sinister. Vivian had somehow accessed Elena's complete medical records, information that explained her uncanny knowledge of Elena's medication schedule, doctor appointments, and treatment costs. The woman had been studying us like laboratory rats, identifying every vulnerability she could exploit. The construction worker Miguel's photos suddenly made horrifying sense. The mansion wasn't just being built with shoddy materials and dangerous electrical work, it was being deliberately constructed to fail. Vivian's insurance fraud scheme required a catastrophic structural failure that would trigger massive payouts while eliminating any evidence of her crimes. Sarah Morgan's voice was grim when I called her with the forged document discovery. Marcus, document forgery in property disputes automatically triggers federal mail fraud charges. We're talking 20 years in federal prison. But there's something else you need to know. The FBI's asset forfeiture team is already preparing warrants. The timeline was accelerating like a runaway freight train. Federal indictments were expected within 30 days. Asset seizure warrants were being prepared for the mansion, Vivian's current house, vehicles, and bank accounts. The construction had to be halted before structural completion, both for safety reasons and to preserve evidence. Elena's voice was barely a whisper as she processed the scope of Vivian's betrayal. She didn't just want our land, Marcus. She wanted to control whether I lived or died. The taste of copper flooded my mouth as the full horror hit home. If Elena had suffered a medical emergency, a fall, a medication reaction, anything requiring hospitalization, Vivian could have used those forged documents to have Elena committed to a facility, declare her incompetent, and seize control of our finances. It was elder abuse with a law degree and a tennis membership. But now I had a choice that would determine everything. Accept Vivian's latest bribe offer of $250,000 in cash, revealing she had access to hidden funds despite her supposed bankruptcy, and let this predator escape to victimize others, or trust the federal justice system to make this right. The sound of construction equipment grinding away on my stolen land provided the soundtrack to my decision. Vivian had crossed every line, violated every boundary, and threatened everything I held sacred. Time to see if justice was more than just a word carved in courthouse marble. Because in 2 weeks, Vivian Thornfield was about to discover that some people fight back harder when you threaten their family. My garage had never looked like a war room before, but by Thursday morning it resembled something out of a conspiracy thriller. Evidence boxes lined the workbenches where I used to organize electrical supplies, and a whiteboard covered in timeline charts had replaced my pegboard of tools. The familiar smell of motor oil and metal shavings mixed with the sharp odor of fresh printer ink as we churned out copies of every document that would nail Vivian to the wall. Attorney Robert Blackstone arrived at dawn looking like he'd stepped out of a courtroom drama, silver hair, steel gray suit, and a briefcase that had probably seen more legal battles than a Civil War battlefield. Dorothy had found him through her late husband's contacts, and despite charging $800 an hour for corporate cases, he'd agreed to take ours pro bono after seeing the forged documents. "Gentlemen, ladies," Blackstone said, surveying our amateur detective operation with approval, "we're not just fighting a property dispute anymore. We're dismantling a federal racketeering operation." Sarah Morgan spread her investigation files across my workbench like a dealer shuffling marked cards. "I've confirmed Vivian pulled this exact scheme in 4 other communities across 3 states. We're looking at pattern evidence that turns this into a RICO case, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The legal strategy crystallized like salt forming in a saturated solution. Civil lawsuit for property theft, emotional distress, and identity theft. Criminal referrals for forgery, fraud, money laundering, and elder abuse. Federal cooperation for asset forfeiture and racketeering charges. And an emergency HOA governance challenge to remove Vivian and reverse the illegal special assessment. Jake Martinez had transformed into our field intelligence coordinator, his military training showing as he organized neighborhood surveillance schedules. "We've got 24/7 eyes on the construction site," he reported, marking locations on a hand-drawn map. Miguel's crew is documenting every code violation, every safety hazard, every cash payment to undocumented workers. Dorothy managed community communications with the efficiency of a retired teacher who'd wrangled middle schoolers for 3 decades. She'd organized the Willowbrook Truth Committee into a network of informants that would have impressed the French resistance. Mrs. Patterson monitored Vivian's coming and going. Mr. Morgan tracked delivery trucks and their license plates. The Rodriguez family documented noise violations with smartphone recordings. The financial investigation required a forensic accountant, and Blackstone had called in favors to get Linda Morrison to work pro bono. Within hours, she'd traced the special assessment money through a maze of shell companies that led straight back to Vivian's relatives in California. The assessment funds never reached HOA accounts, Morrison reported, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard. $1.9 million in construction costs were paid to companies owned by Vivian's brother, cousin, and college roommate. She's been washing money through fake construction contracts. I'd learned something crucial from my union days. When fighting corruption, you document everything and trust nobody until the badges show up. We photographed every piece of evidence, stored copies in 3 separate locations, and backed up digital files on multiple secure servers. Elena surprised everyone by volunteering to be our medical documentation specialist. Her hands might shake from arthritis, but her mind was sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. She organized all her medical records, pharmacy receipts, and doctor correspondence to prove the timeline of Vivian's identity theft. "I may be sick," Elena said with quiet steel in her voice, "but I'm not stupid, and I'm not going down without a fight." The technical evidence gathering resembled a CSI episode directed by Martha Stewart. Professional surveyor Eddie Kowalski provided a sworn affidavit about property boundaries. Structural engineer Patricia Williams documented building code violations that could cause catastrophic failure. Digital forensics expert David Kim analyzed the forged documents with microscopic detail that revealed Vivian had used a different pen for each signature attempt. We learned that HOA financial records are public documents that any homeowner can demand to examine, something Ralph Hansen had taught Dorothy after HOA boards in the 1990s had embezzled millions nationwide before oversight laws were strengthened. Vivian had been counting on homeowner ignorance to hide her theft. Sarah Morgan coordinated our media strategy like a campaign manager planning election night coverage. "We stay quiet until the federal indictments are unsealed," she insisted. "Then we go full court press with documented evidence, not emotional appeals." The surveillance operation revealed Vivian's desperation in real time. Her construction crews were working illegal hours, paying workers cash to avoid labor law compliance, and cutting corners that turned the mansion into a structural nightmare waiting to collapse. But the breakthrough came when Miguel approached Jake with photographs that made my electrician's training scream danger warnings. The electrical work was deliberately sabotaged, connections that would spark fires, circuits that would overload, and grounding systems that could electrocute anyone touching metal fixtures. Vivian wasn't just committing insurance fraud. She was building a death trap designed to kill whoever lived there. Federal prosecutor Jennifer Torres arrived Friday evening to coordinate our cooperation with the Justice Department's Asset Forfeiture Division. The mansion, all construction materials, and every piece of furniture Vivian had installed would become government property pending criminal trial outcomes. "Here's what happens next," Torres explained. "We execute simultaneous warrants for arrest, asset seizure, and evidence preservation. The timing has to be perfect. Any delay gives her opportunity to destroy evidence or flee the country." We had our evidence, our allies, and our federal coordination. But Vivian was about to launch her most desperate and dangerous counterattack yet, because cornered predators don't go quietly into the night. Vivian's Scorched Earth campaign began with a 6 a.m. phone call that made Elena drop her coffee mug on our kitchen floor. The ceramic shards scattered like broken promises as Elena stared at the caller ID display. Arizona Adult Protective Services. "Mrs. Caldwell, we've received a complaint about potential elder abuse and financial exploitation at your address," the social worker's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "We need to schedule an immediate wellness check." The bitter taste of injustice flooded my mouth as I realized Vivian's strategy. She was using the very system designed to protect elderly people as a weapon against us. The complaint alleged that I was financially exploiting Elena and preventing her from receiving necessary medical treatment for dementia-related cognitive decline. The evidence? Those forged medical documents that supposedly showed Elena had, voluntarily, agreed to everything, combined with anonymous phone calls claiming Elena appeared confused and frightened during neighborhood interactions. Attorney Blackstone arrived within an hour, his usually immaculate appearance slightly rumpled from the emergency call. "This is psychological warfare," he said, reviewing the APS paperwork. "Vivian's trying to have Elena declared incompetent before we can expose the document forgery." The APS visit felt like a home invasion conducted by clipboard-wielding bureaucrats. The social worker, a well-meaning woman named Janet Peterson, walked through our house with the clinical detachment of a crime scene investigator, taking photos of Elena's medication organizer and questioning her about basic facts like the current president and what year it was. Elena's hands trembled not from confusion but from rage as she answered questions designed to trap her into appearing cognitively impaired. "I may have arthritis," she told Janet with steel in her voice, "but my mind is sharper than most people half my age, and I sure as hell know when someone's trying to gaslight me." But while we were dealing with the APS investigation, Vivian was spreading her poison throughout the community like a virus in a water supply. Anonymous flyers appeared on car windshields claiming I was a violent veteran with untreated PTSD who posed a danger to neighborhood children. My service record, 30 years of spotless military and civilian employment, was twisted into implications of mental instability and hidden rage. The smell of cheap paper and toner ink from the flyers mixed with the morning desert air as I collected them from our neighbors' driveways, reading character assassination disguised as community safety alerts. Jake's landscaping business became collateral damage in Vivian's war. Fake online reviews appeared overnight claiming his crews were unprofessional, destructive, and possibly involved in illegal activities. 3 of his biggest contracts were mysteriously canceled within a week, costing him thousands in lost revenue. "She's trying to destroy everyone who supports you," Jake said, his combat veteran composure cracking as he showed me the review screenshots. "This isn't just about property anymore. She's trying to eliminate our ability to fight back." Dorothy received the cruelest treatment of all. Someone had researched her late husband's battle with Alzheimer's and used that personal tragedy as ammunition. Anonymous calls to her house at 3 a.m. featured recordings of Ralph's voice, somehow obtained from old family videos, calling her name repeatedly in a confused, lost tone. The psychological torture was so precisely targeted and viciously personal that Dorothy broke down sobbing in our kitchen, her teacher's composure finally shattered. "How could anyone be so evil?" she whispered. "Ralph's been gone 2 years, but hearing his voice, it's like losing him all over again." Meanwhile, the mansion construction had transformed into a fortress operation that would have impressed a military contractor. Vivian hired armed security guards, off-duty police officers who didn't ask questions about the legality of their employer's activities. 12-foot privacy fencing appeared overnight, blocking any view of the construction site from neighboring properties. The sound of power tools and concrete mixers now ran 24 hours a day, accompanied by the mechanical beeping of backup alarms and the occasional shout of workers pushing to meet impossible deadlines. The sweet smell of expensive lumber mixed with the acrid odor of rushed electrical work as crews raced against time and federal investigators. But Vivian's desperation revealed itself in increasingly reckless moves. She offered cash payments to neighbors who would publicly oppose our frivolous lawsuit, literal bribery disguised as community unity incentives. When that failed, she threatened property value lawsuits against anyone supporting the Truth Committee, claiming our disruptive behavior was damaging real estate prices. The harassment escalated to physical intimidation when someone, though we couldn't prove it was connected to Vivian, vandalized Jake's equipment with battery acid, causing thousands of dollars in damage to his commercial mowers and truck. The acrid chemical smell lingered in his garage for days, a toxic reminder that our opponent was willing to destroy livelihoods to protect her crimes. Elena's car tires were slashed while she attended a medical appointment, leaving her stranded in a hospital parking lot at 7 p.m. The security cameras at the medical center had mysteriously malfunctioned during the exact time window when the vandalism occurred. But Vivian made one crucial mistake in her campaign of terror. She underestimated the federal government's patience with witness intimidation. FBI agent Torres called me that evening with news that changed everything. "Marcus, we've been monitoring Vivian's communications under federal wiretap authority. What happened to Elena today wasn't random vandalism. We have recordings of Vivian coordinating attacks against federal witnesses." The gloves were coming off, and Vivian Thornfield was about to discover that threatening federal witnesses carries a 20-year prison sentence. Game on. I found Elena unconscious on our kitchen floor at 6:47 a.m., her body crumpled beside our coffee maker like a broken doll. The metallic taste of panic flooded my mouth as I dropped to my knees, checking for a pulse while dialing 911 with shaking fingers. Her skin felt cold and clammy, and her breathing was so shallow I had to put my ear to her chest to confirm she was still alive. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their urgent voices cutting through the morning desert silence as they worked to stabilize Elena. "Possible drug overdose," the lead EMT announced, checking Elena's pupils with a small flashlight. "Pupils are constricted, pulse is slow, blood pressure dangerously low." But Elena didn't take any drugs that could cause an overdose. Her arthritis medications were all accounted for, locked in our bedroom safe exactly as she'd left them the night before. The hospital toxicology results confirmed my worst fears. Elena's blood contained massive levels of benzodiazepines, anxiety medications she'd never been prescribed. The doctor, a sharp-eyed emergency physician named Dr. Patricia Sanchez, pulled me aside with the grave expression of someone delivering a cancer diagnosis. "Mr. Caldwell, the drug levels in your wife's system are consistent with deliberate poisoning. This wasn't accidental. Someone wanted to incapacitate her, possibly permanently." The crime scene technicians found traces of dissolved medication in our coffee maker's water reservoir, the same coffee maker Elena used every morning for her therapeutic herbal tea. Someone had broken into our house and contaminated the one thing Elena consumed religiously at 6 a.m. every day. FBI agent Torres arrived at the hospital within 2 hours, treating Elena's poisoning as attempted murder in a federal investigation. "This crosses every line," she said, her professional composure barely containing obvious rage. "Poisoning federal witnesses is domestic terrorism. We're moving to immediate arrest warrants." But while Elena fought for consciousness in the ICU, Vivian launched her most audacious legal maneuver yet. She filed an emergency petition claiming Elena's hospitalization proved her mental instability and chronic drug abuse, using the forged medical power of attorney documents as evidence to seek guardianship of Elena while she was unconscious and unable to defend herself. The bitter irony was breathtaking. Poison Elena, then use her poisoning as proof she was incompetent. Jake Martinez organized a 24-hour hospital vigil that turned our community crisis into a neighborhood rally. Dorothy brought homemade soup and organizing skills that transformed the ICU waiting room into mission control. Sarah Morgan coordinated media coverage that finally exposed Vivian's crimes to national attention. The sound of Elena's heart monitor beeping steadily became my anchor to sanity as I held her unconscious hand, watching federal agents interview doctors and collect evidence that would bury Vivian under an avalanche of felony charges. But even from her hospital bed, Elena was fighting back. When she regained consciousness 18 hours later, her first words were crystal clear. "That woman visited our house, said she needed signatures for HOA insurance. I remember now." Elena's memory of the forged documents' creation was the final nail in Vivian's legal coffin. She identified Vivian from a photo lineup as the person who'd claimed to be an HOA representative needing Elena's signature for routine insurance updates while I was away at a Veterans Administration appointment. Meanwhile, Vivian's mansion construction had reached a fever pitch of illegal activity that attracted federal attention like moths to a flame. The grinding sound of construction equipment echoed through the night as crews worked around building inspection schedules. The smell of rushed concrete work mixed with the acrid odor of substandard electrical installations created an atmospheric reminder that Vivian was literally building evidence of her crimes. Miguel approached Jake with photographs that made my electrician's blood run cold. "Senor Jake, she told us to finish everything before the weekend no matter what. But look at this wiring, it's designed to fail. She wants a fire." The electrical work wasn't just shoddy, it was sabotaged. Connections that would arc and spark, circuits deliberately overloaded to cause fires, and grounding systems that could electrocute anyone touching metal fixtures. Vivian was building a death trap designed to trigger massive insurance payouts while eliminating evidence of her document forgery and federal crimes. Federal marshals executed arrest and asset seizure warrants at 5:47 a.m. on a Friday morning. The sound of helicopters circling overhead mixed with the mechanical roar of moving trucks as federal agents inventoried every piece of stolen property for evidence. Vivian's attempt to flee the country had been discovered through wiretapped phone calls. Airport security found her at Sky Harbor International with $2 million in cash, fake passports, and a private jet fueled for the Cayman Islands. Her investment banker husband was already in federal custody, cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. The mansion seizure was swift and thorough. Federal marshals cordoned off the entire construction site as evidence in a federal criminal case, while structural engineers declared the building unsafe due to deliberately dangerous construction methods. But the sweetest victory came when the special assessment was declared invalid due to fraudulent authorization, and all liens were removed from Truth Committee members' properties. Dorothy was elected as emergency HOA president with a mandate for radical transparency and accountability. Elena's recovery was slow but complete. The poisoning had caused no permanent damage, and federal victim compensation covered all medical expenses, plus additional damages for pain and suffering. 6 months later, Elena was fully recovered. Vivian was facing 20 years in federal prison, and I was standing in the foyer of a $2.5 million mansion that legally belonged to me through federal asset forfeiture proceedings. But the real victory wasn't the house. It was what we decided to do with it that changed everything. The Phoenix City Council chambers had never seen anything like it. 400 people packed the auditorium beyond fire code capacity, with overflow crowds watching live streams in the parking lot. The air hummed with tension and anticipation as television crews from 3 networks set up cameras, their bright lights casting harsh shadows across faces filled with righteous anger and desperate hope. Vivian appeared via video link from the Maricopa County Federal Detention Center, her designer wardrobe replaced by an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with her artificially blonde hair. Gone was the imperious HOA president who terrorized our neighborhood. In her place sat a hollow-eyed woman whose legal empire was crumbling faster than poorly mixed concrete. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced City Council President Maria Rodriguez, her voice echoing through the chamber's sound system, "we're here to address proposed HOA reform legislation following federal criminal charges against Ms. Thornfield. Mr. Caldwell, you have the floor for victim impact testimony." I stood at the witness podium, looking out at a sea of faces that included federal prosecutors, investigative reporters, and neighbors who'd been too scared to speak up for months. The sweet smell of Elena's roses, now blooming again in our reclaimed garden, seemed to drift through the building's recycled air as I began to speak. 6 months ago, Vivian Thornfield didn't just steal my land, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. She stole my wife's health, our community's peace, and our faith in the American justice system. I pressed play on the audio recording that had sealed Vivian's fate, her own voice offering me $500,000 in cash to withdraw all complaints and disappear quietly. The sound of her desperation filled the chamber like toxic gas, and I watched several council members shake their heads in disgust. "But here's what Vivian didn't count on," I continued, pulling out the hospital photo of Elena unconscious after the poisoning. "She didn't expect my wife to survive her murder attempt. She didn't expect our community to fight back. And she sure as hell didn't expect the federal government to treat elder abuse as the serious crime it actually is." The chamber erupted in applause that sounded like thunder rolling across the desert. Even the federal prosecutor, Jennifer Torres, was nodding with professional approval as she prepared to present evidence that would destroy any remaining sympathy for Vivian. Agent Torres approached the podium with the methodical precision of someone who'd sent dozens of white-collar criminals to federal prison. "Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Thornfield operated a criminal enterprise that defrauded homeowners across 6 states of over $12 million. Her organization specifically targeted elderly, disabled, and minority residents using forged documents, intimidation, and in Mr. Caldwell's case, attempted murder. The evidence presentation was devastating. FBI charts showing money laundering through 15 different HOAs, photos of Elena unconscious in the ICU, recordings of Vivian threatening witnesses, financial documents proving insurance fraud schemes worth millions of dollars. But the moment that broke Vivian's remaining composure came when Elena took the witness stand. My wife, who 6 months ago could barely speak without crying, looked directly into the video camera connecting her to Vivian's detention cell. "You forged my signature to steal our land," Elena said, her voice steady as bedrock. "You poisoned my coffee to silence my testimony. You threatened my medical care to control my husband. But you made one crucial mistake, Vivian. You forgot that some people fight harder when you threaten their family." Vivian's facade finally cracked like a dam bursting under pressure. Through the video link, we watched her lean forward and scream at the camera, "That old woman is lying. I was helping the community. Marcus Caldwell is a crazy veteran who—" Her public defender frantically motioned for her to stop talking, but the damage was done. Vivian's courtroom outburst was being broadcast live on national television, destroying any remaining credibility she might have had. The defense's strategy collapsed like a house built on sand when federal prosecutors revealed the scope of Vivian's criminal history. 12 previous victims from other neighborhoods provided testimony via video link, describing identical schemes involving forged documents, fraudulent surveys, and elder abuse targeting couples with medical expenses. "Your Honor," Prosecutor Torres announced, "Ms. Thornfield has agreed to plead guilty to all federal charges in exchange for an 18-year sentence recommendation. The plea agreement includes full restitution to victims and forfeiture of all assets obtained through criminal activity." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Vivian would spend the next 18 years in federal prison. Every penny she'd stolen would be returned to victims. The mansion built on my stolen land would become mine through asset forfeiture, completely free and clear. But the moment that made everything worthwhile came when I stood up for my final statement. Your Honor, Elena and I don't want that mansion for ourselves. We're donating it to become the Willowbrook Community Justice Center, a free legal clinic for HOA abuse victims nationwide. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Television cameras captured federal agents applauding alongside community activists, city council members, and neighbors who'd been too afraid to speak up for months. Justice wasn't just served, it was celebrated, and Vivian Thornfield's reign of terror was finally over. 2 years later, I'm standing in what used to be Vivian's marble-covered master bathroom, now converted into a cheerful legal aid office where the sound of children's laughter drifts through open windows. The sweet scent of Elena's prize-winning roses mingles with the aroma of fresh coffee brewing in our community kitchen, creating an atmosphere that feels like coming home after a long, difficult journey. The Willowbrook Community Justice Center operates from every room of the mansion that Vivian built on stolen land. Elena's therapeutic garden has expanded into a healing sanctuary where trauma survivors find peace among lavender and sage. The infinity pool became a reflection pond where meditation classes help victims process their experiences. Vivian's wine cellar transformed into a children's reading room where kids learn about standing up to bullies. You know what I love most? Elena tells me, her arthritis-free hands steady as she teaches 8-year-old Sophie Martinez how to transplant seedlings. Every flower that blooms here proves that something beautiful can grow from the ugliest situations. Elena's recovery has been miraculous. The stress-induced arthritis symptoms vanished completely once Vivian's harassment ended, and she's discovered a talent for public speaking that surprises everyone. My shy wife now addresses congressional committees about elder abuse prevention, her quiet strength inspiring victims nationwide to fight back with dignity. Dorothy coordinates our volunteer program with military precision, managing 57 regular volunteers who provide everything from legal research to therapeutic gardening instruction. The woman who was psychologically tortured with recordings of her deceased husband's voice now helps other elderly victims find their voices to demand justice. We've assisted 1,247 families in 2 years, Dorothy reports during our monthly board meeting, her teacher's pride evident as she reviews statistics that would make any federal agency jealous. 89% success rate resolving disputes without litigation, and we've helped pass HOA reform laws in 23 states. Jake Martinez's landscaping business thrived after the positive publicity, but more importantly, his integrity and skill created a client base that appreciates honest work over corrupt connections. He maintains our grounds pro bono, creating outdoor classrooms where children learn that communities prosper when neighbors support each other instead of tearing each other down. The Marcus Elena Act passed Congress unanimously, creating federal oversight of HOA governance and establishing 20-year prison sentences for elder abuse disguised as property management. Real estate attorneys in all 50 states now provide pro bono services for HOA victims, using our case as a roadmap for fighting institutional corruption. Vivian serves 18 years in federal prison, working laundry duty for $1.20 per hour, while $847 monthly goes toward victim restitution. Her former assets fund the Community Justice Scholars Program, providing college scholarships for children whose families survived HOA abuse. Sweet justice. The money she stole now educates the next generation to prevent her crimes. The Justice Center's impact extends far beyond our neighborhood. Congressional oversight has prevented similar schemes in hundreds of communities. Law schools teach courses in HOA victim advocacy. Our documentary won Emmy Awards and inspired federal legislation protecting elderly Americans from financial predators who weaponize homeowner associations. But the sweetest victory happens every morning when I brew coffee in our little kitchen and look out at children playing in Elena's garden instead of construction equipment destroying our dreams. The sound of laughter replaced grinding concrete mixers. The sight of thriving plants erased memories of stolen soil and broken promises. Elena and I are debt-free for the first time in decades, thanks to federal victim compensation covering all expenses plus damages. The Justice Center generates revenue through consulting services while maintaining free help for victims who can't afford legal representation, sustainability with a mission. Our marriage emerged stronger than ever, forged in shared adversity and tempered by the satisfaction of helping others avoid our nightmare. We speak at conferences nationwide, proving that ordinary people can defeat extraordinary corruption when they refuse to surrender their dignity. The annual Justice Day festival fills the mansion with community barbecues, children's activities in Elena's garden, and workshops teaching homeowners their rights. The taste of Elena's homegrown tomatoes and the sound of neighbors laughing together remind us that victory isn't just about winning, it's about building something better from the ashes of what was destroyed. Share your HOA nightmare in the comments below. You're not alone in this fight, and there are people ready to help you reclaim your rights, your peace of mind, and your faith in justice. Hit that subscribe button and join the HOA Stories family for more David versus Goliath tales where justice wins, corruption loses, and ordinary people discover they're more powerful than they ever imagined. Every morning when I look out my kitchen window, instead of seeing someone else's greed casting shadows over our lives, I see Elena teaching children that from the darkest soil, the most beautiful flowers can grow. That's what real victory looks like. Not just getting your own back, but making sure it can never happen to anyone else.